Welcome to this month's Greg Griffith Leadership Podcast. Join Greg Griffith as we together learn what it means to be leaders of our world as we faithfully love and faithfully lead. Like, share, rate, and review this podcast with your friends and others of influence, for they too are looking for people like you to help them lead and love day to day. Without further ado, here is your host, Greg Griffith.
Oh man, it is so good to be back, and this is just quickly actually becoming one of my favorite ones to do. It's Julie and I, Julie, the executive director at King of Kings, and myself, just kind of riffing a little bit on topics. And man, we've had so far. We had a first one, just kind of structure, vision, strategy, implementation. Yep. We've done women in leadership.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. And I'm really, really excited about today's, because I think this one's so important. And I think you see sometimes in this, I think you see a lot of frustration sometimes because people don't take the time and do this well. And what we're talking about today is hiring. And you know, and especially in a church world, firing is kind of a no-no word,
right?
In church world, you know, and so and we'll even talk about that, because I think that's an important piece too of how to fire well, especially from a church perspective. So we may not get to that today, but I think that would be something probably should be on our topic.
Yeah.
So yeah. Yeah, so hiring well, so important. I remember I had a friend of mine. He was a pastor, and when I became a lead pastor in Michigan, he came to me and he said he had actually had a heart attack at 39 years old.
Oh wow!
Yeah, as a pastor, and it was a stress-induced heart attack. And he sat down with me one day and he goes, "I will tell you what will kill you. It's not going to be cancer. It's not going to be anything else." He says, "It's not even heart attacks." And he said, "Most pastors die from staph infections."
Oh,
and he was talking about,
sure, yes.
He was talking about staph,
right.
And he was talking about, and that just was that reminder to me that it's so important to hire really, really well. Yeah. And I think honestly that sometimes people hire easy. Like they want to say, okay, I just want someone to be in a job. Like it's not just anybody, but sometimes they settle and say, well, I know this person, or this is this, or I know they'll take the job.
Right.
Yeah. Like, you know, cause sometimes you get to, especially in the church world, you get to a frustration point, and in candidness, I think the church world, when we're talking about hiring too, it's not like we have the giantest pond of ponds.
Right.
I mean,
right.
You know, so there's a limited option anyways. So every hire is going to take some time.
Yes.
On there. So let's dive into just some hiring. So First from you, what do you, what are your first things? Like when you're looking to hire, what's something you're always looking for?
Right. So I think that, and this is something we've talked about before, it's the C's. I thought it was 3 C's, but it sounds like calling is also one that you add on. So we're talking about character and competency, chemistry, and then maybe you can talk a little bit about the calling piece of it.
Yeah.
But so let's talk a little bit about character. Character is the most important out of all of these, right? Because if you hire someone of low character or questionable character, it's going to come back to bite you in a million different ways.
Right away. Yeah.
So let's just make sure that we establish that first and foremost. And then competency. Do you feel like that this person is capable of doing the job? Now, and we'll get into this in a little bit. Sometimes you're going to hire someone that you're going to need to develop, but just feeling reasonably confident that you've got someone who could grow in those ways, even if they're kind of a newbie.
Yeah.
And then chemistry, which is super important also. I heard a leader one time say that chemistry is when someone kind of pops their head into your door and you're glad to see them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what makes work fun.
Yeah.
Is when you're feeling like, oh, yeah, I just really enjoy being with this person. So looking at all three of those, and maybe you can unpack calling a little bit too.
Yeah, I first heard of these actually from Bill Hybels. I was at one of his one-day Catalyst retreats, and he came out and was talking about this. And I really do. This is my first measure always, is the same thing with the C's. And for me, always, too, at the end of the day, competency is actually my last evaluative tool.
Yes, I agree.
If someone doesn't have competency, and I have a list of people, but they do have the character and they do have the chemistry, and they don't necessarily have the competency, and then I have someone else that maybe doesn't have the character or doesn't have the chemistry, but definitely has the highest competency, I'll probably pick the lower competency one and say, I can train you.
Yes.
Right? As long as they have the next things I'm going to also talk about. But before I get to that, the calling. Yeah, this fourth C's just been added recently, and I don't remember where I've heard it added from there, but I do like it. And the calling is that this is not just a job, that they really feel called and led to be in this ministry, in this vocation. So really for a church work, that's an important piece, right?
It is, because you're not going to be paying them a ton of money.
Correct, right? They're not going to be an industry leader in compensation for sure. And to be honest, they're not going to be in a clock in, clock out job generally.
No.
It's going to be, one of my favorite memes that I've seen recently was the meme of a guy, and it's whoever it is, I don't know, Leonardo DiCaprio or someone, and he goes, "Oh, isn't that cute? Remember when we thought 40 hours a week was a part-time job?"
Right. Yes.
And I'm not saying that I think the church should just work people to the bone till they die. That's not healthy either. But I know especially as I'm looking at someone doing ministry or leading a department of ministry, if they're wanting to clock in, clock out, they're probably not going to make it in this ministry. It's just not the reality of it.
I agree. So I was talking with someone on our staff yesterday just about the emotional labor of ministry and how so many times ministry can consume your thoughts.
Yeah.
All day long.
Yeah.
You're thinking about it at night.
Yeah.
You're puzzling over certain situations or things like that. So yeah, you're right. It's not something where you turn your brain off when you go home for the day. Yeah. And that's a blessing. It is a calling. And it's especially if in ministry, it's wonderful to be able to do that as to the Lord. So don't hear this as complaining. It's just, it takes a lot out of you.
It does. Yeah. I think that's why it's really important to, when we hire, that there is an evaluation, especially in the hiring, knowing your culture and your community, but also knowing, and building space and expectation for that person to be able to fill their buckets, because their buckets do empty. We were just talking about that, and the important part of that too. And I think too, those sleepless nights, sometimes I will have sleepless nights occasionally. I've had them a lot less in the last 2 years than before, but I'll have sleepless nights occasionally for some things where I'm like, okay, we've got to figure this out. Like, I'm still in my brain working, and my wife Lori always knows. She'll be like, "Greg, where are you?"
Right.
You're like, "I'm not here." She goes, "I know."
Right. Exactly.
But I also have sleepless nights where I'm like, "Oh man, I can't wait to charge this hill."
Yes.
Like we've got some exciting stuff, you know.
For sure.
And yeah. So those are always the exciting things in ministry that are there. And I think when we look at that competency piece, one of the other pieces I use in my initial wave of and I kind of, for me, when I'm looking at hiring, I don't know if you've noticed, I don't know, we've done a few interviews together there. I don't really ask a whole lot of competency questions. I don't spend a whole lot of time drilling down. My questions generally revolve around finding out their chemistry, their culture, finding out some blind spots. I'm looking some stuff that are character spots in there. And then 2, using humble, hungry, smart, trying to find out where they're at with these things, and do they have all 3 of this is Lencioni's ideal team player, I think, is humble, hungry, and smart. So just kind of working through those things, because that's really important. And I think when it comes to churches, you can see that almost right away too. I mean, I think those are things people reveal sometimes without knowing that they're supposed to reveal that,
right?
And they're revealing where they're at with that.
And I think that you can ask questions in the interview that will reveal that as well. So you may not be asking them ministry-related questions.
Right.
It could be that they've never worked in ministry before.
Right.
But asking them questions about what would you consider, if they've been in the workplace before, what would you consider to be one of your greatest accomplishments? And if they talk about I, and all the things that I did, as opposed to maybe the team that they were working on, that gives you maybe some idea of where they're at in that humble category.
Yeah.
If they talk about the ways that they've pursued excellence in the jobs that they've had, that kind of indicates where they're at as far as the hungry part of it, right? Really wanting to strive for excellence. And then smart, how do they work with people?
Yeah.
And what have been people's experiences in working for them? And sometimes you'll find that out if you talk with others who've had a chance to work with them, right?
And I think smart has the same thing too, of even smart looks to culture. So like if you have someone who's not smart, and one way I look at this is when I'm walking with someone and just kind of talking in our facility or talking about the job, and they have started to investigate and know who we are. If they're talking about what they would change right away, I kind of know, okay, I actually don't see that as smart.
No.
I look at that and go, you're not going to be looking at coming into the culture. Now, I'm not saying our culture and things don't need to change.
Right.
But no hire, unless you're hired to be the change agent, comes in right away and says, I know what's wrong and why it needs to be fixed. Unless it's something that's glaring that everyone's going, yeah, we know this is wrong. But if it's not, I mean, if you're walking in and just going, yep, here's what I would do, but you don't know the culture, that's not smart.
Right. It's not humble either.
It's not, and it's not humble, right? I mean, it's kind of, and this can happen. Sometimes we'll have, you'll have a pastor walk into a place and go, well, here's how I like worship, and this is what I would change. And you're in a call, and I'm going, man, yeah, that call committee actually might want you to do that. But if the congregation doesn't, you're going to just start with rockiness, and it's going to be hard the whole way. And so I think there's the ability to kind of ask questions and learn, really is where I see smart coming. The other thing, I think I always use the words create worlds. Learned that from a good friend of mine, Chris Willard, and use that. And I was at a conference with Ed Young, a few years ago in Dallas, Texas, and he said something that impressed on me. And again, I think I think it falls in the humble category. He said that in their community at Fellowship Church, he said no one on their teams uses the word my team. It's always our team.
Oh, that's great.
And I thought that was a really interesting way to speak there. And I really liked that, because I thought, oh yeah, that moves from in the team, it moves from superior and subordinate into togetherness,
right?
And creates unity, which is really important there too. So I listen to those in interviews when I ask about their teams. I go, are they saying my team? Are they, and is it? And then where are the accolades, right?
Yes.
For me, I always am looking: are they casting praise and accepting blame? If I have a person I'm looking to hire that goes and I say, what are your challenges? And the challenges are things that they're owning, that means a lot to me. If the challenges come to like, well, this person on my team does this, I go, okay, you're using my team, and that's not, you're saying that's not your fault, that's their fault. So is that your team or not?
Exactly. Yes.
Because at the end of the day, if something's not working in your team, which I'm asking for, because no one has a team that's saying, yeah, we're doing everything perfectly.
No.
If you do, you've hired Jesus, and I want to know them.
we want to hire him. Yeah. Right. And then you can evaluate chemistry too during interviews and just think, am I enjoying this interview? Is this person
right?
Is this a person that I could see spending, right? Because you spend a lot of your waking hours at work.
Yeah.
And is this someone that I would enjoy spending most of my waking hours with?
Yeah, I think it might be Lencioni. I listen to about 4 or 5 people on a very regular basis, so sometimes all their words become one.
Right.
So one of them, but I think it's Lencioni who talks about hiring people that you actually want to hang out with.
Yes.
And that's really important. You got to be friends with them. You got to, it doesn't mean they're best buds and all that. By the way, I want to go back. I think another C we'll talk about it later. I think another C, I like using same letters. So that's why I do love the chemistry calling, competency and culture. And I think also, and we're going to have to talk about it. It's called whitewater or conflict.
Yes.
There'll always be in a higher conflict, and we'll talk about navigating to that. But before we do, I think we've kind of moved now into, okay, so Julie, when you're interviewing, what are you looking for?
Boy, what I'm looking for is, right, it really is that humble, hungry, smart. You're looking for someone who is very team focused and who's exhibited that in whatever capacity and whatever experiences that they've had prior to interviewing here. So someone who talks about the concept of us and working together and really experiencing success through others. I think that's really important. I'm looking for someone who's got a go-get-it attitude.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So they may not know everything that you're hoping they'll eventually know about the job, but they're really willing to come to the table with ideas and with initiative. That's something you really can't teach. And it's just an internal quality of people, whether they just want to get after it or not.
Yeah.
For me, that's huge.
Yeah.
And then also someone who's got some emotional awareness. And that's super important, right?
Yeah.
And I think you can see that in how they relate to others in the interview.
Yeah.
That's super important.
Yeah.
So I would say all of those things. Yeah, that's where I'll leave it.
Yeah, I think the emotional piece is really important because I think sometimes too. Well, I don't think sometimes when you hire someone who's an emotional leader, and their emotions are going to be where they first drive out of, that can be thrilling and it also can be exhausting. And it's thrilling when everything's going great. It's exhausting when there's trouble. And it can be exhausting too because you don't always know where the roller coaster is.
Right.
So sometimes you're thinking, okay, we're going great, and then all of a sudden there's a drop.
Right.
And so that's really important. I think that's a big piece to look at, especially with that. And I would say too that if you're an emotional leader, and by the way, I think at some point in time, everyone does. Our emotions are who we are.
Yes.
And I think they're gifts of God. I love Chip Dodd's book called Voice of the Heart, which talks about that our emotions actually are God-given. So learning to not only accept them, but be thankful for them, but then also how to use them to expand the kingdom. And that's an important piece. I wouldn't say that I'm an emotional leader, but I have times. I mean, this past week, I think my emotions kind of took me away a little bit. And that just happens. And it's an important awareness to know that when that happens, it does cause then stress on others and others in the team and others in the organization. So learning how to deal with those and then learning to say, okay, when I'm not in an emotionally healthy spot, what do I do with that?
Right.
And so, yeah, I think when you hire, for me, it's having the conversation. And you can know if like when I ask, so one of the questions I will ask people that kind of helps, because I think our emotions always come out when we're passionate about something and we hear the word no. So one of my always questions that I ask is, how do you respond when you hear the word no? Now, if they don't always know how to articulate or say, or if they say, well, I don't know that I've ever had to really do that, that probably tells me they're not fully in tune with their emotions yet. Like they don't, because we hear no all day. Every day.
Right.
Everyone does. It doesn't matter what part you are in the organization, there's always a no. Someone always can tell you no. And I think this is why, Lori and I were just talking about this today, that when we hear no, the person who is receiving the no is actually in the power system, is actually on the subordinate part, because the person who's saying no has the power.
Yes.
And so that means you're having to adjust on that.
Right.
And that's an emotional toil. I don't know.
It is.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. And I think one thing that, this is hard because you can't always tell this in an interview. And this may be a discussion for another time, but I'm looking for a person who's emotionally regulated. Mm-hmm. It's very important, who doesn't allow their emotions to to master them in the moment.
Right.
And especially in a leadership position, that's super important.
Yeah.
Another thing related to that is, do they have a like you said, emotions are a very important part of who we are. Is there some safe place where they can take those emotions? So do they have a support system around them? You're not looking to hire sort of a maverick type who's like, it's just me, myself, and I.
Right.
Because as leaders and as people in ministry, we need to have those kind of support systems around us. Otherwise, those emotions will build and eventually probably blow in an unhealthy way.
Yeah.
So just talking through in an interview, how do you handle tough situations? Can you give me examples of how you've managed conflict with someone else, or experienced a situation where someone said no to you, or those kinds of moments that cause frustration in ministry? How have you handled that in the past? Or maybe it isn't in ministry, but just how have you handled that in your family or in your previous job? Or how have you dealt with a difficult colleague? All of those kinds of things kind of give you a sense of their emotional maturity, their emotional regulation, and how they handle stress.
And I think for me, when I asked those questions, and when I ask those questions, for me, one of the signs that I know if they're really a person that is someone that would be good on our team is if they also, and this then reveals another C for me, coachability. If they can honestly say, here's how I handled it, here's what I think went really well, and man, here's where I wouldn't do that the same way.
Right.
And because generally, when we're hiring, since we're all humans, nothing ever is going perfectly. But if I can always look and say, how am I learning from my past? How am I learning from the things that have come up? And understand that, that it's not like the next person had no issues. Now, if they said they didn't, well, that's a character issue because it's just not true.
Right.
So I know that interview, person isn't going to be totally honest, right? So I think I'm always looking too of saying, where are they able to say, yeah, here's what I did, here's where it went really well, or things that I thought this was good. Here's something that, man, I just didn't see that coming, or that didn't go well. I remember for me, I had one where we had a staff member just wasn't performing at the level that we needed to go. And we'd kind of gone everywhere with that. And, I just was kind of at my limit, and I knew for the organization we had to move on and we had to do that. Now, what I didn't take into consideration was necessarily all of the things that I knew were happening behind the scenes in their personal life. And looking back, I'd go, the next 60 days would not have changed our organizational structure and had problems. The next 60 days would have probably changed at least where they were at with some of the things that they needed. Mm-hmm. And so I put the organization above the person, and I kind of look back at that one now and go, yeah, if I had to do that over again, kind of knowing everything that was there, I wouldn't have done it the same way.
That's interesting.
Wasn't the best spot for me.
Mm-hmm.
So
I know.
Yeah.
I was just listening to a podcast by Pete Scazzaro, and he was talking about managing others well. And he said a lot of times we have a tendency to look at the work that we're doing as the most important thing, but actually the people are the work. And sometimes that's really easy to, it's just something that we skip past. Yeah. But I agree. It's the work that we do with and through people is the most important work that we're going to do.
Way more important. Yeah, way more important. One way I've started to put this into play, and again, not perfectly, I'm not always hitting this right, but one thing is I'm always thinking and saying the measurements that I want to keep the metrics are no longer the milestones, but rather the moments with people. Mm-hmm. And that's the measurements I want, because at the end of the day, I don't think people are going to come to my funeral and say, wow, he did this, this, and this. I think people are going to come to my funeral prayerfully and say, wow, he spent time with me and he helped me with this, this, and this.
Yes.
And it's going to be about them and all of that. Because I think, well, side note, I mean, we just saw some stuff about Bo Schembechler just came out as we're recording this in today's news, and one of his sons says he was not a good human being. Now, all the things for Bo Schembechler, probably the greatest coach in Michigan history, football history, dominated Ohio State, thank God. But all those things will be tarnished if it really comes out about that his personage wasn't there.
Agreed.
So, yeah. What other thoughts?
Yeah,
do you have on
I
that?
was just wondering. So, in a ministry position, we're looking at people who are committed to Jesus and who are seeing their lives transformed by His love. What kinds of questions do you ask in an interview about that, so you can get an idea of where they're at in their walk with the Lord?
Yeah, I will walk in and so my questions will generally be about, tell me about your story. So I want to hear their life story. And I also want to hear in that life story of, a lot of times it will be, how did you get here? And then I'm actually just listening for, where are they bringing faith and Jesus into it? So in that's actually very intentional. I mean, you know me, I don't do a lot of things without intention. I mean, I'm probably a little bit OCD on some of that stuff, where I park and what cups I drink out of and when I drink out of them. It's weird, but
it's good. It's good.
So I never, and I actually don't ever ask a question that doesn't have a purpose for why I'm asking it. What I'm trying to do is hear where they're saying and talking about faith or Jesus or reliance or dependence upon God, or where they see God has led them in our normal conversation. And the reason I'm doing that is because I believe that if they're willing to do that in a conversation where I'm not directly asking, saying, well, tell me about your devotional life, tell me about your prayer life, because I don't think anyone in the neighborhood's ever saying, hey, Billy, tell me about your devotional life, right? They're going, hey, Billy, what'd you do today? And if it was, and if they're sprinkling God conversations in just that normal conversation, I know where they're at spiritually. So mine is really looking to say, where are you at with that? I was just, talking with two people and as we were talking, and I just said, hey, tell me about your family, and so then one started to really just dive in deep with where their family is, and then started talking about how the Lord provided when they were really struggling in this area. And then another one, was talking about how they came to America, and and then began to just talk about where the Lord was leading them in this spot or that spot, and kind of some of their prayer things, without me ever asking about what's the Lord doing in your life, right? Because so that's how I look for the spiritual devotional spot, is I want to see, is it just part of their normal conversation?
Right.
If it's not, that tells me that. That tells me something, because I think we talk normally about that which we're comfortable in.
Yeah, that's good.
So, yeah. The other question I always look to ask about and really dive deep into hiring is, what have they grown?
Oh, right.
So I always am interested in saying, especially if they're already at a place or another place, I want to know, how have they developed people, and how have they grown a ministry? If they haven't, that's not always a deal breaker, but it does tell me that I can't have the expectation that they're gonna necessarily grow something on, like, that they have that skill set already.
Right.
So I have to be prepared to then either have to do a lot of coaching, or send them to a lot of places, which I always think you should always be looking to grow people anyways. Or also be prepared that maybe they don't know how to grow a ministry.
Yes.
And that might not be in their gift set.
It's kind of interesting, because I think about when I was hired here at King of Kings. I had been a first grade teacher for a few years out of college, and then I got married and we had children. And when I applied for my first job here, the only thing that I had grown was kids.
Yeah. Well,
3 boys. Now, I'm not saying that's a small thing, but I didn't have a track record of any ministry that I had grown. Yeah. Now, I wasn't hired to direct a department either. I was hired at a really low kind of this low-level job doesn't seem like a very flattering way to say it, but you know what I'm saying?
You were an entry-level position.
Super entry-level position here, right? So then, so that's fine, because the stakes are low and whatever. But it's just interesting, because that was probably a wise choice on their part, because they just didn't know what my capabilities were. It's kind of a crapshoot at that point.
And I think that's something that's really important too, right? I guess is so you were hired in your first position, but not your final position. Right. And so I think that's something really important for each. First of all, if you're wanting to hire younger, millennials, and Gen Z for sure, they want to know what is the room to grow in the organization. The compensation's not that big of a deal. Boomers, I think, we're more inclined for compensation. Gen Xers are probably a little bit of both. And then Xennials are kind of straddling that fence too. But yeah, your millennials and your Gen Zs, it's not necessarily about compensation. It's about freedom and flexibility in the workplace, which we can have a whole different discussion on. And I'm not sure fully where I land on all that one either. I know you don't either.
I know. I'm not old school.
I know.
I'm a Gen X, but I've got some boomer in me too. Where I'm like, oh, those kids. Get off my lawn.
Oh, man.
Right? No.
Yeah, but they're also looking for what's my room for growth in this organization.
Oh, for sure. And coaching conversations are super helpful.
Super helpful.
Right. I don't know if they should be the only thing that we're talking about or pursuing with our younger employees, because I think there are times when you have to say, hey, that's not a super helpful behavior.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. Or you need to step it up in this area.
Yeah.
I guess you could consider that coaching broadly, but I'm talking about just bringing anything negative into the conversation.
Right. Well, I think the thing, so when I hire someone, I generally am looking for, yes, I want to hire that position, but I'm also looking, do they have potential to do greater positions?
Yep.
And I'm not talking, by the way, I think, I have to be careful how I say this, because not every context is the same. In the context I'm in, I'm not looking at, this person we're hiring for, facility maintenance position. oh man, they could also do marketing. I'm going to make them facility maintenance and marketing. I don't, we're not in a context where that's healthy. Some places need that at this point in time, but also know if you're asking a person to do something on a job that's there, that's going to be hard for them to continue that, right?
Yes.
I mean, because it's got to be their passion. They may be able to do it, but it might not be their working genius.
Right.
So, I didn't tell you yet.
What?
Sorry, this is a squirrel moment, but we're going to have it. We get the riff. This is, I just signed up. I'm going to get a Working Genius certification. I'm going to get certified in Working Genius.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I'm so excited.
Yeah, that's good.
So it's a 2-day thing with about 30 of us and Patrick Lencioni learning on Working
cool.
Genius.
Are you going to California to do that?
No. It's all virtual.
That's cool.
Yeah, no. Yeah.
Well, that'll be interesting. I'm sure you'll learn
so
more stuff.
excited about it.
Yes.
Yeah. So again, and that's the other thing. Let's just get into that a little bit. Interview process.
Right.
What are some things? So King of Kings was actually the first place. Now it's not my second full-time, actual real job. So I don't have a lot of comparison,
Right.
But I was really impressed. When I was going through the interview process, I had to do the strength finders, fill that out and I know that was an evaluative tool.
Right.
In there. I think now we're looking Working Genius. I think we're building that into our process and saying,
Yes.
hey, we want to know what you're at. What are some other things we're looking at in the interview process to kind of evaluate, is this a good hire and is this what we need on the team? Right? They may be a perfect person, but if they don't have the strength set or the Working Genius set, and it's going to be a frustration, is that the right person on the team, right? You can't,
I agree.
I can get all into sports analogies, but I know you don't love those. All right,
don't.
so I won't do it.
I do think another thing that you need to bring to the interview process is some piece where you're really clearly talking about your organization's values and culture.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure that the person you're hiring is a cultural fit for your organization.
Yeah.
So when are those moments that you're talking about, here are the things that are really important to us. This is what we're expecting you kind of to live out. And this is our kind of staff culture as well. So I don't think that a person, right, and nobody wants to have a negative person on their team, but I think one of the things that we look for is someone who's positive and who likes to have fun. And if you're bringing in a Debbie Downer for an interview, it's just not going to be, that's not going to be a fit for us.
No.
And so
It'd be an awesome Saturday Night Live skit, though.
it would.
Yeah.
It would be amazing. But just kind of being really clear on here's who we are and here's who we're not, so that people can kind of self-navigate whether this is an organization that they want to be a part of. Are we the type of people who are like, yeah, and we'll text each other on the weekend if there's something that we're thinking about work-related? Or are we, nope, phones are going away from 5 o'clock on Friday until 8 o'clock on Monday, kind of sort of cueing people in as to how we work so that they can self-select or take themselves out. Right.
So what do you think in the hiring process? Can you talk a little bit too about who does the hiring and then who can even speak into that hiring process?
So typically, especially for kind of a higher level position, let's say an associate director or a director here, we're going to probably have 3, I would say, probably interviews. The first one is just with the people they would be working most closely with to see if they're a good fit for the team. And if that's a no-go, then that's fine. We'll just stop right there.
Yeah.
Because I think that the people who are working most closely with them really need to have a big say in whether that person's getting hired or not. You could bring someone on or bring someone in for an interview, seems like a rock star, and if everybody that they would be working with is like, ugh, then forget it.
Yeah.
It's just, no matter how great they look on paper, it's not going to be, it's probably not going to be good.
Yeah.
And then we'll also have interviews then with kind of maybe our strategic team, which is kind of our
senior
team
leadership.
our senior leadership team. And then probably with our executive team, which is just you and me and Mike, who's kind of our ministry director. So we just want to make sure that it feels really good from the bottom all the way to the top.
Yeah. I think too, for senior pastors especially, I would say this. I do have final veto on almost any position here with a person, because that divisiveness of staff can be, that just will stop ministry in its tracks and actually back it up sometimes years. And so, but I would say this, I exercise that rarely. I can't in my, 9 years now, almost 10 years of being a senior pastor or lead pastor. I've never exercised my veto at this point. But I hold that, and I hold that as a reality of saying, hey, if someone's missing a culture piece, or I just have this feeling that this isn't, so I think that's a healthy thing to do there, because that's an important piece. But I would also say, if you do have that should only be exercised. If, in my mind, I put it as the president has the red button that launches a lot of stuff. Boy, you hope you never really push it.
And really, I think if you've hired well previously and you're getting a group of people together for discernment around a candidate, they're really not going to.
Correct.
Typically, I can't really imagine a scenario where everybody's just got the wool pulled over their eyes, and you're like, well, are you not seeing this? It just doesn't feel like realistic to me at all.
Right. Yeah. No, I would agree with that there. So yeah, that's an important piece there. And I do think it's important to get a lot of voices in there. Now, I'm also a person, at the end of the day, whoever's that direct supervisor, if they're hearing all the pieces and listening, and there's nothing that's like why would we do this? Then it's their call, and they'll have to bear some responsibility.
And they'll have to live with it.
Yeah. No, but that's the reality of it, right? Mm-hmm. So, and that's an important part there too, as well. Let me ask you this question. Where does your gut instinct in hiring come? Like, how do you evaluate with that? Like, your just gut check.
It's pretty important.
Yeah, me too.
And that's the thing about gut instinct, is you can't really spell out exactly always why, but I think right? How can people tell, after a first date, this went well or this was not great? Sometimes it's just a feeling or a vibe you get from someone, and right, different people have different vibes. So what may be a good fit for you wouldn't be for someone else.
Right.
But yeah, I certainly pay attention to that. If somebody looks amazing on paper, and when I meet with them, I think, there's something off here, or I don't feel comfortable, then I listen to that.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I think when it's right too, a lot of times.
Let me ask you too, just this question popped up randomly in my head. Where do you fall on educational background? Like, are bachelors always absolutely necessary, or masters, or?
No, I don't think so. Although I will say that we are a requirement for our directors. I'm not sure about our associate directors, is that they do have a college education, and that's not meant to be snobby or to say that people who don't have a college education aren't smart, because there's a ton of smart people everywhere, right?
Yeah.
I think the things that a college education gives to you is just kind of that liberal arts. You've been forced to read widely, and also you've learned how to write. To maybe a different degree than you did in high school.
Yeah.
And I think that breadth of experience and that exposure to a lot of different kinds of thinking is really helpful for leaders. And being able to write well is extremely helpful as well. And those are things that hopefully a college education will provide for you.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for me, when I think of the college education, it's shifted a little bit. I wouldn't say that it's always absolutely necessary. There's certain roles where it really is, right? Like I could not hire a CFO that does not have a degree in accounting, and right. I mean,
that would be terrible.
So there, yeah. So that's obvious there. But I think in some of the other areas where it's maybe not necessary but preferred. That's also where I'll look. If they don't have it, I want to know the journey, why they don't have it. And honestly, if it was well, I started, got a year in, and I quit, that tells me something. Now, granted, they're in their 18, so they're hopefully not the same person at whatever their age coming as they were as an 18-year-old. But I'll want to dive a little deeper into that to see, okay, what do we have? What's going on here, right? Because maybe that's something that they're still there.
Right.
I don't know,
Right.
so we'll need to find that out on there. Yeah, for sure. Let's talk a little bit about, and then I think this will also encapsulate the other C, which is just the understanding of conflict there. But let's talk about onboarding. I think we can do it. Tell me your onboarding system, or not your system, your onboarding experience here when you started at King of Kings.
Right.
This is so funny.
So
this is not how you should onboard, by the way.
So, first I'll say that I was hired by King of Kings twice.
Yeah.
So the first round I had it. My onboarding experience was fine.
Yeah.
Then I left for about a year and took a job elsewhere, and then I came back to the organization. And the day that I arrived for my first day of work, my boss said, "Oh, I totally forgot it. Today was your first day. We don't have an office. We don't have a computer. Shoot, nothing's ready. Can you just sit in the hall for a while?" And it ended up being like 2 hours. Now, I knew everybody on staff, so I kind of just walked around and visited people while there's a lot of frenetic activity happening in the background. But it also, right, thankfully, it wasn't my first experience with King of Kings, so I was kind of rolling my eyes and saying, "Oh, brother." Yeah. But it wasn't like, what did I just do? I can't believe I accepted a position at a place that was so unprepared for me.
Yeah.
But it did make an impression, and when I took on this role as executive director, I said, I don't want anyone else to have that experience with us, because really your first day, your first week kind of sets the tone for the rest of your time on our staff, and really speaks to our level of preparation and excellence. Yeah. So I don't want people to have an idea of like, oh, we're just sloppy and we don't care. It really does send not only a message that we don't care about our work, it says we don't care about you in particular.
Right.
And that's just horrible for a first week. So it's a funny story. Yeah. So in that way, I'm glad it happened to me, because it's a great story to tell. But yeah, I wouldn't want anyone else to have that story about King of Kings.
Well, my first onboarding experience as well was coming in, and I came in for a person, and again, so it was in the early 2000s. So we were just in a cultural shift of computers and kind of usage of computers and the importance of them. Technology was nowhere near where it is today. But I remember walking in to my office, and I had this super tiny desk there. And then behind the desk was a desktop computer, and it was on a microwave stand. And I was like, and you couldn't fit your knees under it, you know.
You're constantly banging it. Was like,
and I remember going, I can't do this, you know. And it was, well, you know, the other person just never used a computer, so it didn't matter. And I said, yeah, I do. Right. And so I think that taught me onboarding also is very personal, meaning that you got to know what the person is going to do, and that probably is not their predecessor. And so it's really important. And so onboarding to me is really important, because I think you want your first day experience. By the way, every new hire, they will always remember their first day.
Yes.
Always. Doesn't matter if it's their third first day somewhere else, or your returning first day, right? Or their first day ever. Right. They're going to remember that. And so you really do want to make it really, really important. So yeah, we do have a whole guideline and onboarding procedures. We would share this, just shoot us an email there or contact either one of us. You can find us at kingofkings.org. We'll gladly share that with you. But we really do believe in a good onboarding experience. And so the procedures all here and what's there. and doing all that. And I think the other piece with onboarding, because onboarding isn't just about the day. I think you're going to have quite a bit. And so I like a phrase that a friend of mine, John Herzog, used to say, is he said, I never want to be blindsided and always have my eyes wide open. And I think this is something we have to always remember. Every new hire, and I don't care if they're brand new, first position, first time, then you should know this. Or if they're an actual veteran where you're like, they have 30 years of industry experience, whatever it is. They're going to come and there will be some conflict. And just because you hire them doesn't mean, okay, great, now I don't have to worry about that position.
No,
right?
It's only just begun.
Yeah, it's only begun. And, and we oftentimes go, I want to hire people that will make my job easier or I can be cleared up. When you hire new people, I actually always say it's about 1 year of really direct, intentional, where you're not necessarily doing the nuts and bolts of the job, but you are heavily involved in the how's it going? Where are you at? What are some frustration points? How can I help? Maybe even saying, okay, you can't do it all right now because it's a fire hose. So what am I still doing?
Right.
And then what am I going to give away? I think sometimes that's missed, right? And then we have conflict because we go, I hired you to do all this and it's not getting done.
Mm-hmm. And that's where the one-on-ones are really important, so that you're just staying on top of things with the new hires and making sure that you're shepherding them along properly and getting them more and more familiar with the culture and what our expectations are around the job, answering questions that they might have, straightening things out that are getting off a little bit. A lot of that happens in the one-on-one. So it's really right. There's a ton of reasons to have one-on-ones, and that's an important one. Yeah. And really, any time that you add someone to your staff, you're changing the staff chemistry. It's just like, right? So you've got Kool-Aid and it's delicious. And then you added another ingredient and you're hoping it'll make it taste even better, but it changes the composition. So just being aware of that. I mean, once you introduce someone new, it will never be like it was, never be the same again. And just making sure that that's going to be a good thing. And if you're staying attentive to what's going on with your new hire, it'll have a much better chance of succeeding.
Yeah, I also think it's really important, as you just kind of talked about that, of adding those staff members, is to remember too that when you add someone, I think it's really important that to acknowledge the fact that you're going to have some uncomfortable conversations. Mm-hmm. And first, I would say, if you're not willing to have uncomfortable conversations, please don't hire people. I mean, just don't. Because if you won't have them, first of all, they're going to get frustrated because they're going to think everything's going okay. You're going to be super frustrated because everything's not going okay.
Right.
And then people around you are going to be frustrated because there's going to be a wake from just everyone kind of going, what's going on here?
Or why aren't they taking care of this issue? Right.
And the uncomfortable conversations don't have to be confrontational. It really just comes along and says, hey, like, let's figure something out. Like, and that's an important piece. And let me say this too, this is ongoing. And there will be times where, you hit this out of the park, and there will be times where you go, oh, shoot, I knew I was supposed to do that and I didn't. Right. It's never too late to correct it. No. I really don't believe that. So you can always, or I really do believe that.
Yes.
Words create worlds.
Right.
Yeah. So that's a really important piece too, because with every hire, as Julie, you're just so right. You're changing the chemistry within your organization and within your staff.
Right.
And so it's really important to just be a part of that and aware of that.
Yes.
And kind of lean into that with those hires. Yep. Yeah. Fascinating article that just came out. Oh, gosh, was it Barna? Is it Barna that I sent it to you? But it was about the difference between management and coaching. Mm-hmm. And we haven't even gotten a chance to dive into it. But, man, I really liked it. talks about one-on-ones, which we're ahead of the curve on
Yes.
with that, which is really, really great. But then moving to, coaching through that. And that's an important piece too.
Yeah.
And again, comes back to, but to coach, you have to have someone that's coachable. Right.
Yes.
For sure.
Sure.
So if they know everything, it's
like
just
talking
going
to a brick wall.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's not going to work. Right. So
Exactly.
Yeah. So
Good.
that's good. Closing thoughts on hiring?
I think I would just say, in regard to the kind of the checklist that we were talking about, you want people to have kind of it's going to be unique in that each hire is going to be joining maybe a different department on your team, but you want them all to have a similar experience. You want them to feel like they've been welcomed into an environment that was prepared for them.
Yeah.
You want them to feel like they're receiving the support they need, especially in the first couple of months. You want them to feel like you were eagerly anticipating they're joining your team. And so what are the things that you're going to, what are the experiences that you're going to put around those people so that everyone who joins your team feels that way? So it's really important to be intentional around that. And then think about, after they've been here a month, 2 months, 3 months, what are the things that you're continuing to do to help them feel like they're an important part of what you're doing? I think part of the checklist that we have is sharing, again, our values and why they're important so that they can start to internalize those themselves. All of that's really critical. So they're not just making sure that their physical needs are taken care of, but that they're also really understanding your culture and how you operate together. And I'm not talking just about church culture, but also staff culture and coaching around those things. And so, like we said, one-on-ones are really important with that, but the ways that you intentionally onboard people just reinforce those positive messages that you're wanting people to receive when they join your team.
Yeah. Yeah, I think my closing thoughts on this would be that I would say when you're hiring, it is not a one and done process. Great, you're hired, let's go. I think that it's really important to, and this is kind of in that coaching space there. It's really important to build up. It's also important to be honest and make sure that you have great clarity of what's going on and where you're at. But then you also have to continue to build up. And I do think, when you look and you say, okay, I've hired someone, they need to know that not only are they a part of a team that has value for them and value from them, but also they need to know that team is a team that wants to see them succeed. And it's really also, I think when you hire, you need to be that person's biggest cheerleader. Now you also need to be that person's most honest feedback giver. Right. But you have to also they need to know that the person who's hired them is saying, I want you to succeed. And that's really, really important on that in hiring well in my thought. So, yeah. Well, this was great. I loved it. Yeah, this was really good. Hey, if you like this, again, share this, get this out to others. Thanks so much. And we can't wait for next month and what we're going to be talking about next month.
Thank you for being a part of this month's Greg Griffith Leadership Podcast. Join Greg next month for leadership insights to faithfully love and faithfully lead. Now go be terrific today.